The old coach showed up at the game. No one expected what happened next. It had been years since anyone had seen Coach Thompson, and when he showed up at the big game, no one knew what to make of it. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The game was a huge deal for the town. It was the championship, the one everyone had been talking about for months. The stands were packed, the air thick with anticipation. The players on the field were laser-focused. Everything was lined up for what was supposed to be an unforgettable night. But then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared at the edge of the field. A man in an old, worn jacket that everyone instantly recognized. It was Coach Thompson. He hadn't been seen since he retired from coaching years ago, and for a moment, everyone just stood there, frozen. It wasn't like he'd made a grand announcement. There was no build-up, no fanfare, just the quiet arrival of someone who once held the weight of the town's hopes on his shoulders. Coach Thompson had led the team to its greatest victories and deepest losses, and when he retired, it was as if he had faded into the background. But now, here he was, standing near the sidelines like he belonged there, just as much as the players. The current coach, Coach Harris, glanced up from the playbook he was holding, confused. He'd been the one leading the team for the last few seasons, taking them to the brink of the championship, but even he had to admit that Coach Thompson's presence was unexpected. The younger players had only heard stories about Coach Thompson's legendary coaching style. The older ones, those who had played under him, hadn't seen him in years. To them, it was like seeing a ghost from the past. The crowd fell silent for a moment. People whispered among themselves, exchanging confused looks. No one knew what was happening. No one knew what to expect. Was he here to offer advice? Would he come down on the field and take control? The uncertainty hung thick in the air, mingling with the rising tension of the game. Alex, one of the team's star players, looked at his teammates. "What's he doing here?" he muttered under his breath. No one answered him. They all just kept their eyes on Coach Thompson, waiting for some sign, some indication of what this sudden appearance meant. Then, as if it had all been planned, Coach Thompson raised his hand and waved over to Coach Harris. Coach Harris walked over to him. The two coaches exchanged a few words, but no one could hear them from the stands. As the conversation continued, the crowd shifted restlessly. Whispers turned into speculation. Was Coach Thompson going to take over for the night? Would he be on the field, calling the shots? There was an underlying fear that the team's hard work and preparation might be overshadowed by the arrival of a man who had once been the heart of the team. For the first time that day, the noise from the stands faded into the background. The players on the field, normally so focused on the game, started to feel like they were part of something bigger. Coach Thompson had a way of making them feel that way, like they were part of a legacy. He never had to say much, but when he did, it always made them believe in themselves more than they ever thought possible. His presence alone was like a spark. It was like he was reminding them of what they were truly capable of. Coach Thompson didn't speak a word to the team that night. Instead, he stood quietly on the sidelines, watching. The game had already begun, but the atmosphere had shifted. There was a subtle energy in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. The players, caught between the rhythm of their own game and the presence of the man they had revered for so many years, started to play with a little more fire. Every tackle was sharper, every pass crisper. The game felt different, not because of anything Coach Harris had changed, but because of something Coach Thompson had brought with him, an unspoken reminder of what this team was capable of. Alex, the quarterback, was the first to notice. He had been on the field long enough to recognize when something had changed. He had been playing the game with intensity, but now, as he surveyed the field, He felt something deep in his gut. It was as if Coach Thompson's presence had unlocked a part of him he hadn't known was there, a part that had been dormant all season. "Do you feel that?" Alex asked his teammate Jake, the wide receiver. Jake nodded slightly. "Yeah, it's like something's different." They had been good all season, but they hadn't been great. There had been something missing, an edge they couldn't find. Now, with Coach Thompson standing there, silently watching, Alex felt like he had finally unlocked the missing piece. As the first quarter came to an end, Coach Harris turned to Coach Thompson. "What do you think?" he asked. Coach Thompson didn't answer immediately. He just watched the field for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he took in the players. Finally, he turned to Coach Harris and gave him a small nod. "They're playing better," Coach Thompson said, "but they need to believe it. All of them, not just a few." Coach Harris frowned. "What are you getting at?" Coach Thompson pulled out a whistle. The sound of it was sharp, cutting through the noise of the crowd. For a brief moment, everyone on the field froze. The players looked toward the sidelines, where Coach Thompson was now stepping forward. Coach Harris looked over at him. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. Coach Thompson looked directly at the players on the field and waved for them to gather. His command wasn't loud, and it wasn't authority they felt. It was respect. They had been through many drills under Coach Thompson's guidance, but nothing had prepared them for what was about to happen. The players huddled on the field. "You've been playing for yourselves," he began, looking each player in the eye. "I can see it in your moves, the hesitation, the doubt. You've been waiting for someone to show you the way. Well, guess what? You are the way. It's not about what you do alone. It's about what you do together. You've got the tools. You've got the skills. But you need to believe in each other, in what you can do together. You want to win this game? Then do it as a team, not as individuals." The players stood still, taking in his message. For most of them, this was the first time anyone had ever said anything like this. It wasn't just about winning. It wasn't about personal glory. It was about unity, about finding strength in one another. Coach Thompson's gaze softened. "Now go out there and prove it to yourselves." As the players broke the huddle, something changed. The way they carried themselves on the field was different. The way they passed the ball, the way they communicated without speaking. It was all smoother, more in sync. They weren't just playing for themselves anymore. They were playing for each other. The second quarter kicked off with a new energy. As the game went on, the energy in the stands shifted too. The crowd began to cheer louder. The team wasn't just winning. They were playing like a unit, like a team that had finally found what they had been missing. The second quarter was like nothing the team had experienced before. The game was still close, but as Coach Thompson's words continued to echo in the players' minds, they felt something shift inside them. The hesitation was gone. And as the clock ticked down, every pass, every tackle, every block became more precise, more purposeful. Alex, the quarterback, felt the change most of all. The ball was slipping out of his hand with more ease, the weight of his decisions no longer holding him back. They weren't just covering each other. They were working as one unit, as a true team. Jake, the wide receiver, noticed it too. And that shift, that understanding, made all the difference. The clock was winding down on the first half, and the score was neck and neck. The opposing team had put up a good fight, but something told the players that they weren't going to be able to keep up with the shift in momentum. Coach Thompson had given them the words they needed to hear, but it was the team that had to put them into action. And they were doing it. In the final minutes of the first half, with the score tied and the ball in their hands, Alex called the play. It was a simple pass, one they'd practiced dozens of times, but this time it felt different. Jake, running at full speed, stretched his arms out, fingers grazing the ball as it flew toward him. He leaped, pulled the ball into his chest, and landed on his feet. The crowd erupted into cheers as Jake crossed the end zone, securing the touchdown. This was a victory for the entire team, and they all knew it. As the players huddled around each other, Coach Harris stood on the sidelines, his eyes wide with astonishment. He had watched the team struggle all season with their chemistry, with their ability to gel. But here, on this field, in front of him, was the team he had always hoped for. This was the team that could win the game. This was the team that could do anything. Coach Thompson's sudden presence had reminded them of the importance of belief, of teamwork, and of trusting in each other. Coach Thompson didn't need to say anything. The players had done everything they needed to do themselves. They had found the heart of the game, and as the whistle blew to signal the end of the first half, it was clear. They weren't just in the game. They were in control of it. Coach Harris walked over to Coach Thompson. "I don't know how you did it," Coach Harris said quietly, "but I'm glad you're here." Coach Thompson gave him a smile. "It wasn't me. It was them. They just needed to remember who they were." The second half of the game started with the same intensity the first half had ended with, but now the energy was different. They were playing for each other, for the pride of being a part of something bigger than individual glory. Coach Harris, who had been on edge all season, finally allowed himself to relax. He could see it now, the transformation that had taken place on the field. Coach Thompson had given the players something they didn't know they needed, the belief that they could accomplish anything as long as they did it together. As the team returned to the field for the second half, George, one of the older players, looked over at Alex. "Let's finish this," George said. Alex nodded. "We've got this," he said. The first few minutes of the second half were hard-fought. The opposing team wasn't going down without a fight. It wasn't until midway through the third quarter that the first major breakthrough happened. The opposing team had pushed hard, and they were closing in on the end zone. The defense had been struggling to hold them back, and the tension was palpable. Alex stood on the sidelines, watching as Coach Thompson offered quiet instructions to the defense. The crowd erupted into cheers as the defense held strong, and the momentum began to shift. Alex could feel it, the way the players on the field had come together as one unit, as one force. They weren't just reacting to the pressure anymore. They were thriving under it. They were playing their game on their terms. On the sidelines, Coach Thompson gave a small nod of approval. The offense took over, and it was clear that the game had changed. Alex dropped back to throw. With a quick release, the ball soared through the air. Jake sprinted the last few yards, crossing into the end zone for another touchdown. The crowd went wild. The players erupted into cheers. As the final minutes of the game ticked away, the opposing team's efforts grew more desperate. They had lost their rhythm, their ability to read the field. The tide had turned, and they knew it. Coach Harris stood with his arms crossed. When the final whistle blew and the game was over, the players gathered together in the center of the field, their arms around each other's shoulders. They had done it. They had won. But it wasn't just the victory they celebrated. It was the way they had come together. Coach Thompson stood at the edge of the field, watching the celebration unfold. He didn't need to say anything. The players had shown him everything he needed to see. The team had won, not just the game, but the respect and trust of each other. The post-game celebrations were intense, as expected, but for Coach Thompson, there was something even more rewarding about watching the team celebrate together. As the players were caught up in the cheers, hugs, and high fives, he stood a little apart, quietly observing. He didn't need the accolades or the attention. He didn't need to be the center of the celebration. He knew that this was their moment, and he was content just to have been a part of it. Alex was the first to spot him. "Coach Thompson," Alex said, "we couldn't have done it without you. You made all the difference." Coach Thompson looked at him. "It was always in you, Alex. All I did was remind you what you're capable of." Alex shook his head. "It was more than that. We've had good coaches before, but there was something about the way you made us believe in each other. You didn't just teach us to play. You taught us how to trust, how to play with heart." Coach Thompson smiled. "Trust, huh? Well, I always said football's as much about the people as it is about the game. I think you all figured that out tonight." As the celebration continued around them, George, the veteran player who had been with the team for years, approached. He clapped Alex on the back, then nodded to Coach Thompson. "I think you've earned a seat at the table, Coach," he said with a grin. Coach Thompson chuckled. "I've never been one for the spotlight, George, but I appreciate the sentiment." George raised an eyebrow. "You might not want the spotlight, but you've earned it. Hell, you've earned more than just the spotlight. You've earned our respect." George's words weren't just about Coach Thompson's tactics or wisdom. They were about what the coach had done for the team. He had reminded them of something that they had forgotten, that the game wasn't just about winning. It was about finding the strength to overcome, to trust one another, and to push through when it felt impossible. Coach Thompson placed a hand on George's shoulder. "You all did the hard work," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You're the ones who made this happen. I just helped you remember what you already knew." As the team began to gather for their post-game speech, Coach Harris stepped up to the front. "I don't have much to say," Coach Harris began, "but I'll say this. What happened tonight wasn't just a win. It was a lesson in teamwork, in trust, and in believing in each other when it would have been easy to give up. You guys showed me something tonight. You showed me what it means to be a team, not just in name, but in every sense of the word." Then, Coach Harris turned to Coach Thompson. "And Coach Thompson, you gave us that. You reminded us of what we were capable of. You brought out something in us that we didn't even know was there. For that, we're all grateful." Coach Thompson didn't say anything in return. He just nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of what had been said. The respect from the team was all he needed. That was his reward. As Coach Thompson turned to leave, Coach Harris caught up with him. "You know, I was skeptical when you showed up today," he said, his tone light. "But I can honestly say I've never been prouder of this team." Coach Thompson smiled. "You did good, Harris. You did good." And with that, the old coach left the field, his heart full. The following days after the victory were filled with celebrations, but Coach Thompson found himself standing on the sidelines, watching quietly from a distance. The town was still buzzing with excitement, as if the championship itself had somehow made everything brighter, more vibrant. Alex, the quarterback, had become the heart of the team in many ways. He had learned to lead not by dictating what others should do, but by showing them through his actions that they were all in this together. A week after the game, Coach Harris called for a team meeting. It was their first time coming together since the championship, and he knew it was important to take a moment to reflect. The players were still riding high on their victory, but Coach Harris wanted to make sure they understood what had truly been achieved. As the players gathered in the locker room, Alex walked in. He didn't walk in like the star anymore. He walked in like a teammate, like a leader who had learned what it meant to lead with others, not just ahead of them. The room fell quiet as Coach Harris stepped in front of the team. "You guys did something special," Coach Harris began, his voice steady but proud. "This isn't just about a win. This is about everything you learned along the way, about believing in each other, about playing for each other, and about trusting each other, especially when things didn't look so good." The players exchanged glances. But there's something else, Coach Harris continued, his eyes scanning the group. It's not enough to win one game. It's not enough to play well one night. What you've learned here, that's the kind of thing that lasts. It's the kind of thing that makes you a better player, a better teammate, a better person. Don't forget that. The team sat in silence for a moment, taking in his words. The quiet intensity in the room said everything. They weren't just celebrating a championship. They were celebrating the transformation that had taken place over the course of the season. The work wasn't done. They had learned something much more valuable than how to win. They had learned how to be a team, a real one. Coach Thompson, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the room, nodded slightly. Alex, who had been sitting near the front, stood up slowly. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He looked around at his teammates, at the faces that had become more than just his teammates. They were his brothers now. And this wasn't just a game. It wasn't just a season. It was the beginning of something that would carry them for the rest of their lives. "We did this together," Alex said. "I couldn't have done it without you guys. All of you. We're a team, not because we played together, but because we believed in each other. And that's something I'll never forget." The room erupted into applause. It was a moment of recognition, of appreciation for what they had built together. As the cheers died down, Coach Thompson stood up, quietly walking to the front. He didn't need to say much. He simply looked at the players, his eyes filled with pride. "You've all come a long way," Coach Thompson said, his voice low but strong. "And now, you've learned the most important lesson of all. It's not just about the game. It's about the people you play with. And you've shown me tonight that you know what it means to be a team." As Coach Thompson's words settled in, Alex looked around at his teammates, at the brothers he had found in this game. They had done it together, and no matter where life took them, they would always be more than just a team. They would always be family. The town was still buzzing with excitement weeks after the championship win. The parade through Main Street had been a sight to behold. Cars lining up for miles, people spilling out of shops, waving banners and cheering as the team made their way through the streets. The victory had brought the town together in a way that few things could. The sense of pride and unity hung in the air, a feeling that everyone was a part of something special. But for Coach Thompson, the victory wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. He knew that while the championship win was monumental, it was the lessons learned along the way that would matter most in the long run. They had learned how to trust, how to lead, how to follow, and most importantly, how to stick together. One afternoon, as the team gathered at the local diner for a celebratory lunch, Coach Thompson sat quietly at a corner booth, watching them interact. The room was filled with laughter and stories from the season, everyone talking over each other, reliving moments of glory and missteps with equal passion. The noise didn't bother him. In fact, it warmed his heart. The players weren't just reminiscing about their win. They were connecting, bonding over something far greater than a trophy. They were living the lessons they had learned. All right, Alex said, raising his hand for attention. "Let's settle down. Coach Thompson, come on. You have to tell us what you were thinking when we made that final play. I still can't believe we pulled that off." The entire table turned to look at Coach Thompson, who was quietly sipping his coffee. He smiled softly, his eyes twinkling with that familiar, calm confidence. "I was thinking the same thing I always think," Coach Thompson replied, his voice steady, "that you guys knew exactly what to do. I didn't have to do anything. You all made it happen." There was a collective silence, and then George, one of the veteran players, spoke up. "But Coach, you told us it was about more than just playing the game. You made us believe in something more. That's why we won." Coach Thompson's smile grew, but he shook his head slightly. I didn't make you believe anything. You all did that yourself. All I did was remind you of what was inside you from the start. The players exchanged glances, some of them nodding, others smiling knowingly. They had heard him say things like this before, but now it made sense in a way it hadn't during the season. They realized that the real victory wasn't just about the X's and O's of football. It was about the spirit, the connection, the teamwork. And Coach Thompson had known that all along. After lunch, as the players began to disperse, Alex pulled Coach Thompson aside. He had been thinking about something since the win, something that he felt needed to be said. Coach, Alex began, his voice a little quieter than usual. I've been thinking about what you said to us that day at halftime. You told us to play for each other, not for the scoreboard. That really stuck with me, more than I realized. I don't think I understood what you meant until now. Coach Thompson looked at him with a kind but thoughtful expression. What do you mean? Alex took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. I was always focused on the game, on my performance, on the stats. But when we really came together, when we trusted each other, that's when we played our best. And I think that's what makes a team. It's not about who scores or who gets the credit. It's about the guys you're playing with. That's what you taught us. Coach Thompson nodded, his expression softening. It's good to hear you say that, Alex. You're right. It's about more than just the game itself. It's about the people you share it with. And if you can carry that with you, you'll always be a winner, no matter what the scoreboard says. For a moment, Alex just stood there, absorbing the wisdom of the old coach. He had been a part of the game for so long, but now he realized he had been playing for the wrong reasons. The game wasn't about the spotlight, about the individual accolades. It was about the people who helped him get there, the ones who picked him up when he faltered, the ones who cheered him on. Thanks, Coach, Alex said quietly. I'll remember that. Coach Thompson watched him go, his heart full. He had given them all the tools they needed to succeed, but it was up to them to take those lessons and make them a part of who they were. And as he looked at the players, now laughing and chatting together, he knew they had taken it to heart. The team wasn't just a group of individuals anymore. They were a unit, a family. And in the end, that was what would carry them forward, long after the championship trophy had faded from memory. They had learned that it wasn't about the game itself. It was about what they built together. And that was something that no scoreboard could ever measure. The days after the big win seemed to stretch on, filled with celebration, but also reflection. For Coach Thompson, life had slowed down in a way that felt both peaceful and a little bittersweet. The team had become more than just players to him. They were a living reminder of everything he had tried to teach over the years. The victory was not about a trophy. It was about what they had learned, about the journey they had all taken together, about the friendships that had been forged in the heat of competition. A few weeks after the championship, Coach Thompson found himself back at the field, not to coach, but to watch. It was a quiet Saturday morning, and though the field was empty, the memories seemed to linger in the air. He had always come to this field to teach the game, but now, as he sat on the bench, the lessons were complete. It felt like the right moment to step away, to let the team continue on without him. The work was done. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the field, Alex walked up to the bench where Coach Thompson was sitting. The sound of his footsteps on the gravel echoed softly in the stillness. "Coach," Alex said, his voice low but steady, "I've been meaning to come by and thank you again for everything." Coach Thompson looked up, surprised by the young quarterback's visit. You don't need to thank me, Alex. You've already proven everything I could have hoped for. Alex sat down next to him, the weight of the season still hanging on his shoulders, though now it felt different. The pressure was gone, replaced by something quieter, something more lasting. I think I finally get it, Alex said after a long pause. What you meant when you said it's not just about the game, but about the people you play with. The last few weeks I've been thinking a lot about that. I've been so focused on winning, on playing the game the way I thought I should. But now I realize it was never about that. Coach Thompson listened, his gaze fixed on the field, watching as the lights in the distance flickered on, one by one. It's about the team, Coach, Alex continued, his voice gaining strength. It's about the way we came together. It's about the way we fought for each other. That's what made us strong. Not our plays, not our stats, but the way we had each other's backs. Coach Thompson smiled, a slow, satisfied smile that spoke volumes. I'm glad you understand. It's always been about that. The game itself? That's just a small part of the bigger picture. It's the people, the relationships, the trust you build with each other. That's what makes the difference. And you, Alex, you led them in a way that I've rarely seen. You've got a good heart, and that's the most important thing. Alex sat in silence for a moment, taking in the words. He hadn't expected Coach Thompson to be so open with him, so sincere. He had always admired the coach's quiet strength, the way he commanded respect without needing to demand it. But hearing those words now, it felt like everything had come full circle. I wasn't always sure I could do it, Alex said quietly, almost to himself. I thought I was supposed to be the one leading, calling the plays, making the decisions. But now I know that being a leader isn't about doing it all yourself. It's about bringing everyone together. It's about trusting the guys around you to do their part. Coach Thompson nodded slowly. That's the truth. Leadership isn't about being the loudest or the best. It's about making the people around you better. It's about believing in them, even when they don't believe in themselves. Alex looked out at the field, his mind racing with memories of the season, the tough practices, the grueling games, the moments of doubt, and then the moments of triumph. He could see the team now, not as a group of individuals, but as a single, powerful unit. Each player had a role, each player had a purpose, and each one had shown up for the others when it mattered most. I'm grateful for everything, Coach, Alex said, turning back to him. I don't know if we would have made it this far without you, without your lessons, your guidance. You didn't just teach us how to win games, you taught us how to be men. Coach Thompson sat in silence for a while, watching the stars slowly begin to appear in the sky. He had seen many players come and go, many seasons come to an end, but this team, this group of young men, was different. They had something special, something that went beyond the field. They had each other. And that, he knew, was the greatest lesson of all. You've learned more than you think, Alex, Coach Thompson said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of experience. And now, it's time for you to pass it on. Be the kind of leader that helps others find their way, just like you've done. Alex nodded slowly, a new sense of purpose settling over him. The season was over, but the lessons would stay with him forever. He had always thought he needed to lead the team by being the best, by making the plays. But now he knew that true leadership came from within, from lifting others up, from showing them that they mattered. As Alex stood up to leave, he turned back to Coach Thompson one last time. Thank you, Coach, for everything. You gave us more than just a win. You gave us a lesson we'll never forget. Coach Thompson smiled, his heart full. You're welcome, Alex. You all did the work. I'm just glad I could be a part of it." And with that, Alex walked off the field, leaving Coach Thompson to sit alone in the quiet night. The field was still, but in the silence, Coach Thompson felt something that was anything but quiet. The work was done. The team had learned what it truly meant to be a team. And for Coach Thompson, that was enough. Weeks passed, and the glow of the championship win slowly began to fade, but the lessons learned by Coach Thompson's team remained. The victory was no longer the talk of the town. It had been replaced by the quiet but powerful realization that the season had been about more than just a game. It had been about growth, about transformation. And for the players, it had become clear that what Coach Thompson had taught them on the field transcended football. It was about life itself. Alex, now more confident and more grounded, found himself carrying those lessons with him everywhere he went. It wasn't just on the field that he led. He found himself standing up for what was right, for what was fair, even when it wasn't easy. He had learned to trust, not just in his teammates, but in his own ability to lead, to make decisions that were for the good of everyone. He had learned what it meant to put the team before himself. The team, too, had changed. They no longer saw each other as just teammates. They saw each other as brothers. They didn't just celebrate wins. They celebrated each other's successes, both on and off the field. When someone was struggling, the others stepped in, offering support, encouragement, and sometimes just a listening ear. They had become a family, and that bond extended far beyond the locker room. Coach Harris, who had grown accustomed to running the team, had found his own way of integrating Coach Thompson's lessons into his own coaching style. He had always been a good coach, but now he was a better one. He knew that the foundation had already been laid by Coach Thompson. Now it was his job to continue building, to foster that sense of unity and trust. The victory was just the beginning, and he was determined to make sure that the players would continue to grow, continue to learn, and continue to build on the legacy that Coach Thompson had left them. One quiet afternoon, as the team was finishing up their practice, Coach Thompson showed up again. It was unexpected, but it didn't feel out of place. The team had moved on, yes, but they still remembered what he had taught them, and they knew that the door would always be open for him. He had been a part of their journey, and now his presence was no longer something to be feared or uncertain about. It was simply a reminder of the lessons they had learned together. Coach Harris saw him from the sidelines and waved him over. Coach Thompson walked up slowly, his eyes scanning the field, taking in the sight of the players, now working in sync, moving with purpose and unity. "You've done good, Harris," Coach Thompson said with a nod. "I can see the difference in them." Coach Harris smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." They stood together for a moment, watching as the players finished their drills. The sound of the ball being tossed, the pads clashing, the whistle blowing. It was all familiar, but it felt different now. It wasn't just about the sport anymore. It was about the connection, the camaraderie, the trust they had built. Alex jogged over to them, wiping sweat from his forehead. He saw Coach Thompson and immediately broke into a smile. "Coach," he said, his voice full of respect, "good to see you again." "You too, Alex," Coach Thompson replied. "I've been hearing a lot of good things about you. You're leading the team well." Alex shrugged modestly, but there was a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "We're all leading each other now. It's not just me." Coach Thompson's gaze softened. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Keep that attitude. Keep believing in each other." As the players gathered around, Coach Thompson spoke to them, his voice calm and steady, just like it had been all those years ago when he first took charge. "You're more than just a team," he said. You've become something stronger than that. You're a family, and no matter where life takes you, remember that. You've got each other. The team stood in silence for a moment, taking in his words. It wasn't the loudest speech, but it was the most meaningful. The lessons they had learned, the ones they had carried with them all season, were still with them, and they would continue to carry them for the rest of their lives. Coach Thompson turned to leave, his hands in his pockets. But before he did, he stopped and looked back at them one last time. "You've all got what you need," he said, his voice quiet but full of meaning. "Now, it's up to you to make the most of it." As he walked away, the players remained standing, watching him go. There was no need for a grand goodbye, no need for any more speeches. They understood what he was saying. They understood that it wasn't about the trophies or the wins. It was about the people you had by your side, the lessons you learned along the way, and the way you carried those lessons with you as you moved forward. And as the sun set over the field, casting long shadows across the grass, the team knew they had already won something far more valuable than a championship. They had won the bond of trust, the power of unity, and the knowledge that no matter where life took them, they would always be a team, a family, and that was enough. The game was over, but their story was just beginning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.